𝗟𝗲𝗿𝗵𝗵𝗶. Ladies and gentlemen, brothers and sisters, welcome to episode 20 of the Convo podcast entitled Teaching and Learning in Lockdown. Of course, lockdown itself needs no introduction, but tonight's discussion is a live discussion on some of the concerns, some of the frustrations that we all know and we've all been experiencing of late. Teachers the state over are trying to engage with their students from behind a computer screen. Students from kindergarten are trying to increase their, very probably unhealthily increase their screen time from half an hour up to 6 hours a day. Year 12 students have their trials thrown into the mix, questioned, postponed, run remotely online. And then, of course, parents have had to transform themselves into formal educators overnight. All of these problems themselves are our problems that we've been experiencing on a daily basis, and they themselves need no introduction. But on this episode, inshallah, we will try and channel some of those frustrations into a productive conversation, engaging the opinions of our wonderful guests for tonight, a teacher, parent, an educational leader, and a year 12 student, to try and have that conversation about what it's been like and some tips along the way of teaching and learning in lockdown. Stay with us. Welcome back, dear viewers and listeners, and thank you so much for joining us for this episode. We might start off, of course, by introducing our esteemed guests for tonight. We were just having a chat before we got started about how thankful and grateful we are that we can have such a wonderful panel of guests for tonight. So let's, without any further ado, let's get straight into introducing our guests for tonight. Hamza, did you want to take us away?
Well, perhaps they can introduce themselves, but I can mention who they are. So we've got brother 𝗟𝗲𝗰𝗵𝗶. Abdul, why don't you tell us a bit about yourself and specifically what you do within education?
Assalamu alaikum. Thank you for inviting me tonight. So I'm a deputy principal instructional leader. This is my first year in that role, but prior to this, I've been a classroom teacher and a stage supervisor, assistant principal. And I've been in the field for about 8 years now. So looking forward to this conversation. And it will be, and as we discussed prior to the start of the session, we want to keep it real and have a natural conversation. So that's what we're here to do.
Jazakallah khair. And we've also got Sister 𝗟𝗲𝗰𝗵𝗶. I think I'm pronouncing that correctly. I hope I am. And please introduce yourself as well.
Yes, assalamu alaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. My name is 𝗟𝗲𝗰𝗵𝗶, and I'll be the one who's voicing the concerns and the struggles of Year 12 student during online learning. I'm currently enrolled in the University of Sydney's foundation program. So for those who've never heard of a foundation program, it's geared towards international students, and it's kind of like a transitional program similar to the IB diploma, where we take courses similar to the HSC, but it's kind of fast-tracked. As Mr. Badr said, it is a joint struggle which needs a joint effort to reach some solutions.
Inshallah. And we've also got with us Sister 𝗟𝗲𝗰𝗵𝗶. I think I pronounced that correct. I hope I did. But please, a bit about yourself as well. No?
No.
Fantastic.
Close, that's all right. It's 𝗍𝗲𝗰𝗵𝗶. It's got a bit of, those who watch 𝗟𝗲𝗿 probably, I don't know if there's anyone in the audience.
Yeah,
will know that.
I never had a chance with that name, did I?
No. So it's got a few silent letters in there. But I'm currently actually working at a government high school, and I'm part of a COVID learning support program. Prior to that, I worked at an independent school, a faith-based school, and I was there for 2 years as a learning support coordinator. So I had experience previously working with COVID with a private school, and this year I've had the opportunity to work in a public government school and to see how differently things are run. So yeah, I'm looking forward to sharing those experiences and having a chat today.
And we're certainly looking forward to hearing them, especially because you seem to have experience across both the private and public sector. So it'll be very interesting to see how that pans out in the discussion as well, inshallah.
We might just start with, for no particular reason, to be honest, if I was to bed it down to one reason, it would be that, in the way that education's been set up in the modern day, we always talk about, and teachers would know this, Shahad, you'd know this as well. We talk about having a student-centric approach that, students are at the center of the learning. So though everyone has a lot to, I'm trying to say this in the nicest possible way. I don't want to say whine about, but everyone has a lot to
constructively contribute.
Yeah, constructively contribute and express in terms of their grievances of whatever they're experiencing. I think the education system does put you as the student at the center of all of this. So I might start with you and just ask you, what kind of challenges have you personally been experiencing, you and your circle of friends in Year 12? And just give us a little snapshot of that, if you will.
Yeah, sure, no problem. So as you said, you really need to have a student-centered approach, and it's tough to deliver that type of learning when you can't even see your students. So I'd say the biggest challenge for me would be engagement. So during the class, you can't have that free flow of discussion like as we are having now. Zoom's always awkward. You want to unmute, you feel like you're barging into the convo. And so one thing I'd say is it's been a challenge to have that type of engagement.
Can I ask you if this one is awkward for you as well?
No. It's just usually when you're in a breakout
room.
Sorry,
I also have to point out that you said barging into the convo. That is literally what you're doing today.
Yeah, but all of us are. I mean...
It's true. No, can I say, honestly, I completely agree with you in the sense that it's a very different, having classes and having your teachers invite you onto Zoom calls, not like a podcast, obviously. It's a very different scenario. It's a very different framework and setup and stuff. So let us not barge in, but can I just get you to finish off what you were saying? So sorry to interrupt.
That's all right. No, but it's really hard to have that level of engagement when, your camera's off, your mic is muted, students are half asleep, and it's not the teacher's fault. I truly commend all of you guys, parents, teachers. It's hard. It's hard to deliver that type of learning when you really can't. One thing that my program does is attendance is marked through your video and sometimes participation. So rather than assigning tasks to be submitted before 11:59, this isn't a personal attack. I know a lot of high schools do that, but we get marked, our attendance is marked based on participation and based on your engagement during the class. So I'd say that's even a solution moving forward to force engagement, and slowly it will just become a habit.
So let me ask, with your particular program that you're doing, how does that match up with HSC? Because nowadays there's a lot of concerns with regards to HSC exams, formal assessments, all that kind of thing. Do you have any kind of issues with examinations and assessments and things with this whole lockdown situation?
So I've actually had a round of assessments, my final exam last semester. And so what we use is kind of like an educational platform like Moodle. We use something called Study Group, similar to Canvas. And we had our examinations through an invigilation software. So we all download it. And prior to that, we even had digital literacy courses. They were compulsory just to kind of teach us how to navigate through the online learning, program. And so the invigilation software, it records your screen, your audio and your video. And they will go through each student's recording and to help minimize cheating, obviously. And as much as it was quite annoying, you always have background noises going on. It's hard to take an examination when you're at your house, you're, not in your classroom environment. But yeah, it's been quite well. I don't know if it's a popular opinion, but I'm in favor of online learning. I really love it. I feel like it kind of helps you have your own independent study schedule. But I don't know about you guys as teachers. What's your perspective on teaching online?
Maybe we can ask Sister Aisha, considering you're in that dual position as both parent and teacher. So maybe first we can ask the teacher, side of you, and then we can ask the parent side of you.
Yeah, well, they both go hand in hand actually, I agree, like with online learning, there's positives and negatives that come out of that. And obviously the sort of the older students who are in high school, especially year 12, bridging onto university, a lot of things are going online anyway. So they're more used to the technology, having used that a lot, and it's a lot easier for them to get their work done. But as a parent, and if I can go back to sort of last year's COVID situation, not last year, the year before, how that ran through. For me, I know that most parents actually struggled to educate their children, even at home trying to get homework done, let alone having to now adjust and adapt to COVID. And I know that, they're not educators, they don't know how to teach their kids. But even for me as a teacher, and I had 3 young children, primary age school children at home, I even struggled to teach them. And I'm a teacher myself. I faced issues where, and I heard about parents coming from non-English speaking backgrounds, or parents who had, cultural things, or multiple children at home. Also, recently now that childcare centers are closed. So even if they have multiple young children, everyone has to be at home now. So a lot of the younger children, I feel, in primary school aren't really adapted to the technology and know how to use that. And even some of the parents don't know. It's hard to navigate your way around. Later on, when we can get into discussion, we'll go a little bit deeper into this. But as a teacher, in terms of this year's COVID and working in a government school, as part of the COVID intensive learning support program, we're not actually focusing too much on the online learning aspect as much as we're going into the mental health of students. So that's something that the program in itself has identified based on COVID in 2019. And we can go into that a little bit later on when we talk about it. But that's my perspective.
Okay, I just want to share something real quick. Hamza knows I'm big on using my share screen to his...
these sometimes go wrong, so everyone just hold on to your seats and hope this does right.
I just want to share this WhatsApp message. I think I've tried and failed to wipe out some names, but let's just pretend we can't see them. I'm just going to wipe another couple out live on air. So I wanted to show you this comment here and just read it out to you guys as well. Okay, so it says here, stacks of paperwork with a set expectation to be achieved. Basically, and they're talking about parents here. Basically, parents are thrown at the deep end without any guidelines. We don't have the experience to teach. Lockdown is already tough as it is. And on top, there's this additional duty. Just trying to manage one child is hard, let alone having 3 or 4. Okay, so that comment really resonated with me in the sense that there are, when you're out there and you've got, as a parent, 3 or 4 children, they've got the realities and the struggles of lockdown, which itself is quite challenging. And then on top of it, to have to become this formal educator overnight. I think a lot of people in the community are really feeling that. And
not just that, like we've got to realize and remember that those parents are also at work at home. So they're juggling their own full-time online role now with now being an educator as well. Let's ask Abdul here. How do you guys, so coming from the perspective of someone who's more involved in the management of these kinds of things, what kind of approach have you and your institution taken to these online challenges? And have you guys been able to address sort of these real concerns that parents have?
Yeah, look, good question. I just want to clarify that anything I say obviously represents my views. I come from a primary background, so a primary school environment. So one of the big challenges there, and I know Aisha mentioned it earlier, is that parents obviously aren't teachers, and in the primary school, during the primary school years, there's a lot of explicit instruction that's required. And on top of that, there's that immediate and effective feedback that needs to be given to students in order for there to be successful learning taking place. So we know, as a leader and I know as a teacher, And now, especially after the last lockdown, parents know this as well. Nothing's going to replace, especially in the primary school years, because I know Shahad mentioned, she prefers and loves the online learning. But in the primary years, nothing's going to replace that face-to-face learning. And I know there was mention of, there's 6 hours worth of learning. It's not the case, obviously, in a primary school. We do have our breaks, our interruptions, assemblies and whatnot. But when there is teaching and learning taking place, it's quality teaching that requires that explicit instruction. There's a lot of, as the teacher, there's a lot of I show the students how to do things. Then we do it together. Then they do it with a bit of the teacher's help. And then it's pushed out to the students doing it on their own. Obviously, when you're talking about home learning or learning from home, all that is pushed aside, and we don't expect, no one expects parents to do that. So I guess to answer your question, Hamza, the approach is really one from a well-being point of view, that is really reassuring the parents that our priority is, our students' well-being and their families. And then we'll simplify the work as much as we can, provide you with the support that we can, and just know that let your child do their best, you do your best, but don't stress to, try and get through everything. Nothing is, compulsory for you to do. We're here to support you. So that's sort of the approach that I can confidently say that a lot of schools that I know are taking, sort of thing.
So let me just, quickly a follow-up question. On average, with the students at your institution, how long do you think, especially being a primary school institution, would they be spending in front of a screen? Because that's a big concern that a lot of parents have.
Yeah, look, so obviously it varies from school to school and then household to household. I can tell you, it's obviously we've had several weeks of home learning, and today I spent an hour and a half trying to assist a parent with getting their child set up online for the first time in several weeks. So you have packs available, that they can do on a book, pencil, with a paper and a pen, and then that option to be online. Also, different schools, different classrooms set it up differently, where they may try and replicate or provide some explicit lessons that are pre-recorded. But like I said, that's not going to replace that face-to-face learning where the teacher can stop.
I might try to bring you in here, Shahad. So there's the theory of it, and obviously your experience is very different to what Abdul's been talking about. He's working at a public school. But because we had a chat about this before we went live, that, you wanted to voice your concerns, but also those of your immediate circle of friends and so forth. Can I get you to maybe share some thoughts on that end? Like, there's the theory of it, but, there are still a lot of grievances of what might not be taking place or what things could be bettered and stuff. Where's that concern at in terms of your circle of friends, mostly year 11 and 12 senior students in the school scene?
Yeah, so the biggest concern right now is trials and what's going to happen with that. Obviously, we don't know the outcome. It's a very unpredictable circumstance right now, but one thing is we still don't know how fair the HSC will be and the outcome, given that the HSC is kind of our one shot to uni or uni entry. And so it's just been overwhelming. I've been hearing from my friends, they barely have time to study for trials because they're still catching up on class homework to account for their attendance. And it's just, even just waking up 5 minutes before your 5 minutes before your class, rushing to your Zoom, just that rapid switch. Like, sometimes it feels like I have to jumpstart my brain just to go from sleeping to quickly focusing and studying class. So yeah, that's been a huge concern. But one thing that I would want to say is that we're focusing on our experience and how we're spending too much time online and, as Mr. Qureshi mentioned, screen time. But one thing that I don't hear often, or it's not really talked about, is people who don't have access to devices or a stable internet connection, and how are they going to be, they're at a disadvantage, and how are they going to be able to participate in the trials or even just online learning in general. So do you guys have any comments or?
Yeah, I've got some points about that, which I experienced. One thing that I experienced in the last lockdown as well was that we were actually given notice by the government that we knew that lockdown was going to happen. So schools had enough time and parents had a little bit of time to sort of prepare and organize devices if they needed to from certain schools. And then this year we had sort of a lockdown over just the 2-week holiday period, and everybody expected to return, day one. And then we heard it was another 2 weeks. So there was a little bit of uncertainty, and I think a lot of parents thought that, okay, it's just another 2 weeks, we'll probably go back. But now that it got extended till sort of the end of August, there was a delay in trying to get people online and get them sort of motivated to start learning. On top of that as well, I noticed with my children, when last lockdown happened, I never liked them to go on devices at all. So they were used to, maybe say 20 minutes a day or something. And then all of a sudden I had to borrow all these iPads, and my children were stuck on that, sort of like every period for half an hour or so forth, trying to do their work. And like Shahad said, even though I had, 4 devices at home that we were using, but then our internet couldn't cope with it. And then there was signal problems. So we all had to be kind of like in the same room near the signal, and we couldn't all be online at the same time. So we had to sort of, make sacrifices that way. And especially with my younger 2 children, I noticed change in their behavior actually for being online that long. They became cranky. And another thing with that is, I sympathize with primary school teachers, especially or even high school, they have classes of say 20 to 30 students, and then they have to sort of get them all online on Zoom at the same time. And there's kids, trying to put their hands up, answering questions, and they don't get a chance to talk. And I saw kids getting frustrated. They'd lose motivation because they couldn't interact. And it just became really hard for them, and they ended up giving up.
Yeah. And sometimes it takes an experience or two like that over a sustained period of time to actually then just become disenchanted with the whole process, and sort of just say, all right, it's not for me, So I think that's part of why, even theoretically, it's always meant to be well padded in terms of that support structure and that support program and so forth.
Sorry, if I could just mention, I want to quickly go back to what was being mentioned. Sufyan, you opened by talking about being student-centric, and obviously that's critical with anything to do with education, but I'm just going to mention a comment here. So we've got a comment on our Facebook stream by a Joseph Baker, and his comment reads, "I'm a teacher and I'm still making lessons right now that I have to post for my students tomorrow. It's become a 24-hour job. Supporting and troubleshooting all day, planning and recording all night. When will this end?" So obviously, our dear listener, viewer, Mr. Baker, is clearly frustrated. Now, perhaps, Abdul, what about you? You work with teachers, right? So part of your role is an instructional leader, I believe. So what about the teachers that you manage and that are part of your team? How have they been dealing with this?
Yeah, look, I think a lot of people share that gentleman's frustration, and just keeping in mind that the first lockdown we had was probably a bit of a learning curve for everyone. They got to experience what they did. It was new for everyone. It's something that you can't control. It's a unique circumstance that you can't really plan for. With that in mind, this lockdown, I can't comment on his school or where he works, but I know lots of teachers that'll talk about how their approach has changed. Last lockdown, halfway through, they were looking at trying to replicate what takes place in the classroom. You quickly work out that that's not going to happen. So it's looking at what's a priority right now, and a priority is the students' well-being as well as staff. So classroom teachers, their well-being. So sitting up and planning all night to deliver the following day it's sort of looking at, is that something that's going to be good for the teacher, and what's for the amount of input you put in, what's the output, like how many students are going to be engaging in that learning, what's the percentage that of students that are going to be jumping online with you to do that. And I go back to I think maybe Aisha mentioned it about the whole Zoom classes with 20, 30 students. Yeah, that was something that teachers quickly worked out. Like, you know what, you can't have a Zoom session where you have 20, 30 kids sitting there and you're trying to teach them. Hence why a lot of schools have gone towards, let's pre-record and then have used Zoom sessions for sort of a bit of a catch-up, a well-being check-in, to check in on the students, answer any questions. But to try and teach live online, yeah, it is very, very difficult. And my advice to that gentleman is, looking at, possibly, is there a need to sort of plan so much, for what he's trying to get across? I don't know, like it's a bit difficult based on his comment to give that advice sort of thing. But in my opinion, I'm not sure it's worth staying up all night to plan to teach something or to provide something online the following day. I'm just not sure, and I don't think any leader expects that. A lot of the push has been, staff well-being, student well-being. We need to make sure we're looking after ourselves, looking after the families of our students. So, yeah.
I was going to say that I think a theme that's emerging is that, Abdul, we might need you as a mobile service just to go around to the other senior management. On a serious note, when you say that well-being is our main priority now, obviously well-being is always a priority, but I like what you're saying in the sense that, like, normally it's kind of like on equal footing. Like when situation's normal, you've got your well-being, but then you've got your sort of, your intellectual academic milestones that you want to meet, and you kind of need to let that standard just fall a little bit and give priority to the well-being. I think that's a fantastic approach to take from a management perspective.
It's critical because without well-being, like if well-being drops off a cliff, let's say, then you're going to get nowhere on the academic side of things anyway. And
I was just about to say that as well, like regardless whether it's in normal circumstances or not, if the well-being isn't there, the learning's not going to take place anyway. So
at the very least, online during this period, if you've got your well-being in check and you're okay with that, you can achieve something, as opposed to your well-being plummeting and then really achieving nothing on the other end. But I guess just an open-ended question to anyone who'd like to take it. Do you guys think that the same educational outcomes, effectively the same, can be achieved during this period as it would be at school and during a regular non-lockdown period?
I'll jump in. I'll have a bit of a go. I think it's going to be different, obviously, because not one household is going to be the same. You don't know what's going on, what type of, how are the students engaging? And like you said about mental health, just to go a bit about my role, what I'm doing at the moment is just to give the viewers a bit of an introduction, which I should have done from the beginning. But I'm a tutor in the COVID intensive learning support program. So what happened was the government realized that during the last lockdown, there was a whole bunch of students who came from underprivileged households or Aboriginal Torres Strait Islander or have difficult circumstances, and they actually missed out completely on the online learning last time. So they did nothing at all. They had been identified, and the government actually funded around $200,000 per government high school to get tutors in and run an intensive support program. What's happened now this year is those students have now again moved online because of the lockdown. So our role as tutors now hasn't been so much as to tutor them online, but to check on their mental health and see how they're going. So I actually make daily phone calls to my group of students from year 7 to 10, just to sort of touch base on them and check on them to see how they're going mentally. But what I found a lot of the time is because I'm making phone calls home, often the parents pick up or a guardian picks up, and I'm actually having to spend half an hour just listening to them and their complaints and, you know, the frustrations that they're facing. And they actually tell me that their children have sort of lost self-esteem because of the last lockdown, and they just don't have any motivation at all. And a lot of the sort of the year 10, 11, 12 students at the particular school have opted to find work now instead. So they're working at, you know, McDonald's or KFC and so forth, because a lot of their friends are working there as well. So they actually would prefer to have that human interaction and see people rather than be locked up in a room and have, you know, deadlines and all these tasks to complete and so forth. So yeah, I've seen that shift as well for the, you know, mental well-being of, you know, not only the students, but of the parents as well.
So Shahad, I guess you really are the outlier in preferring the online model. It seems that not many are a fan.
But as Aisha mentioned, she was speaking about social life or lack thereof. I've turned into a hermit with online school. I've literally turned into a hermit. I'm in my room locked up from 10 a.m., my first class, to my last class at 6 p.m. My breaks, because I have no social life, so I might as well spend studying. And I feel like that's the case with most Year-12s. You know, you don't have time for a social life, so might as well keep studying and revising. And so, yeah, it's really demotivating, and we risk burning out because we're spending the whole entire time cooped up in our desk, in our room. So as much as I do like online learning, I like the experience and the learning styles, but I really don't like the social or unsocial aspect of it. Like, I truly understand why it's called distance learning, because you do end up distancing yourself. It can be a very, very isolating experience if you don't have the correct support. And as Aisha was mentioning, I'm glad that there is a program or tutoring center being held for people who don't have access to devices or an internet connection. Or
can I use this opportunity to just share something that before
apparently, by the way, sharing your screen stuffs it up and people can't see it. So just FYI.
No. What I was going to say was one of our viewers, out of respect to the viewers, has actually shared something here. And I wanted to just pass that on to everyone. So there's a couple of nice quotes that we've got in the comments. No significant learning occurs without a significant relationship. So that's from the Yale Child Study Center, some Dr. James Comer. And there's another very similar kind of quote here. It's more of a graph, but it's talking about how if you look at therapy in general, it's got a little pie chart, and then it's got how 15% is about your technique in therapy, 15% is hope, 30% is your family and school, and 40% is relationship. So if you sort of apply that in an educational context, it's kind of saying that, you know, if you have a strong support base and you have strong relationships, even with that teacher-student relationship, that's effectively 40% of the job done, you know, in situations where, and I think, like I said, it's a beautiful little theme emerging from this, that you sometimes need, it's part of the success of the system to let the academic milestones just take a back seat for a little bit, because mental well-being is always supposed to be the number one priority.
But so let me just, jump in there. I like what's being suggested here, but I think online so severely compromises the integrity and nature of that relationship. It's just not the same. Like, you know, when we were at university and you'd have sort of lectures, tutorials, whatever, delivered online, material thrown at you online. And when you're a university student, you're mature and able to cope with that, right? So you can take what you need and you can get it done. But school students are very different. Like, you need that in-person, in the classroom, face-to-face kind of relationship. And I think online really just severs that almost entirely. And I think that's a necessary reason why some of the quality has to be sacrificed.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say, like you were saying, like in classrooms, we have differentiated learning, especially in primary schools. So it's really difficult to try and maintain that when you're online. Unless, like you said, you have a good, you know, group of support teachers who, you know, it's well organized and able to get to those students. But still at that stage, it's hard to deliver the one curriculum for everybody. And how would you differentiate that?
You know, perhaps that's why a dedicated teacher, someone who truly cares for their students, is someone who's going to think about these kinds of issues because they're aware. And perhaps that's what, you know, our Mr. Baker, who commented, that's partly maybe why he's up late at night trying to make sure that he's delivering the best he can for his students. Yeah. But I guess it's a tough job.
Yeah, of course. And I think that's an important point. Yes, as a teacher, we know what quality teaching is. So yes, you talk about differentiated learning. You want to make sure you're differentiating for those students in your class that need that support. Not only supporting those students that require some assistance, but even trying to extend those high achievers as well. That is the challenge, and I guess after that first lockdown, you come to realise that look, we're not going to replicate what happens in the classroom, especially from a primary perspective. I think at Shahad's level, she can read and she can learn herself. She can read, understand what she's reading, and take something away from it.
Most of her learning's pretty much done, just judging from a purely expression and articulation point of view.
That's right.
To a certain extent, but independence, it's a crucial skill to have. Even if we were face to face, most of the HSE, the way that it's taught, it is based around independent work. But still, yeah, sorry, you can proceed.
So can I just jump in there and say that
primary, that's exactly what I'm saying. At primary, they're not at that stage yet, and that's what we're trying to sort of push out. Go, you can barge in now, Hamza.
All right, thanks for allowing that. Shahad, you're right. A lot of it is modelled on independence, but let me hazard a guess here. But many Year 12 students are not as independent as they should be. They're still very, very reliant on teachers, materials, resources, explanations, all that kind of thing. And I think that's part of the reason why there's such a feeling of chaos amongst them, because it's not like we can just deliver the content to them online and say, go ahead and do your thing. Ideally, that would be great, but it's not. But
even those who are independent, or for those who can just get straight to work, have a consistent study routine, when you're reliving the same exact day in and day out, it's mentally exhausting.
Yeah, certainly. But I'm just saying that I think Year 12 students need it as well. Maybe, obviously, not to the extent that primary school students do, but I think Year 12 students still do. In fact, there were discussions about the HSE amongst the education department about how if they were to allow students to return to classrooms in regional areas who aren't experiencing lockdown, then that would give them an unfair advantage over students in locked down local government areas, because those students wouldn't have access to their teachers. And so then there was this whole issue of, okay, how are we going to make sure that the HSE is then equitable? If some have been given access to teachers and schools and everything else in that environment, but others haven't. So I think, we have to realize that the environment is critical there as well.
Yeah, one thing also I noticed, and this is sort of a little bit off topic, but still related, education-wise, which is a conversation for another day. But I remember I was working at an independent school a while ago, and they decided to shift NAPLAN online. But that particular school hadn't really trained students into technology. A lot of the students hadn't used computers at all, like the primary school students. And then all of a sudden they were just have to jump online and learn how to use a keyboard and type and so forth. And I know that they struggled a lot, but then having worked at another independent school, and I noticed that since kindergarten, they had smartboards in the classroom and all the students knew how to use an iPad and where to get it and log in. So even within the education system, initially there's been flaws. But I don't want to go too much into that, but I'm just saying that there's a lot of differences with how education is delivered, generally speaking, whichever school you go to. And I feel like sometimes the private independent schools, especially towards online learning, are really sort of strict and forcing sort of attendance and submission of assessments and so forth, because I feel that they need to justify to a lot of the parents about the fees that they're paying. Whereas when you get to sort of government schools, it's a bit more relaxed because, they're looking more at I feel like they're looking more after the well-being of the student. Whereas private schools, I feel, are just, overworking teachers perhaps, and, giving a lot of lessons, and a lot of students and parents are getting stressed because they feel that they have to complete this work because of the fees that they're paying.
I think can I jump in?
Yes, sorry, go ahead.
Because I think that's an important point that goes back to that gentleman's comment as well. Like sometimes as teachers, you're sort of also thinking about or concerned about what the parents think. So especially that first lockdown, you're sort of thinking about, oh, we've got to provide students with this, with that. We got to make sure they've got, this much learning to do a day. And then what that does is, and you don't it's not intentional, and you sort of think as the teacher, you're trying to do the right thing by the student and the parent, is that it puts a lot of pressure on the parent, where suddenly they've got so much learning to get through that they struggle with it. Whereas once we hear the parent voices, we know that, they don't want work all day. They just want something realistic, achievable, something that they can support their children with, and not be flooded with lots of work that they're not going to be able to achieve, and then feel like a failure as a parent, and then feel like they've let down their child as well.
I think that's a really good opportunity to take in another comment that we've got on the Facebook page, where it's been mentioned, the main challenge my children have been facing is work quantity. They've observed that there's less content or quantity they work through when face-to-face. However, this isn't the case online, and they find they're spending more time doing schoolwork. So one common concern that seems to be coming through is the extent of work. Now, I want to try and sort of look at the various mindsets here. You've got the student who's been allocated sort of, let's say, an extensive workload. Let's just assume it's extensive, right? And we can ask why. And then you've got parents seeing that child in front of their screen for hours at a time trying to complete this work. But that's been allocated to them by a teacher who is answerable to their school. And they need to tell the school or justify to the school, yep, I'm doing A, B, C, I'm doing this with my students, I'm running this lesson, I'm doing this activity and whatever else. Because the teacher themselves doesn't want to be in a position where they're being interrogated. What are you doing for your classes? Where's your work? And perhaps, Abdul, maybe you can shed some light on that, because schools want to know what their teachers are doing. And so sometimes teachers may give work to demonstrate that they are actually doing some kind of teaching, and that might result then in extensive workloads for students.
Yeah, I think that's probably a follow-up from what I was just saying. I think teachers, especially that first lockdown. When I'm sort of speaking about the second lockdown, because it's something we've experienced, and now knowing what we experienced that first time, I know schools that have definitely taken that into consideration. It's like, no, we know it's too much for our parents. We sort of spread out the day. We look at advice that's provided to us and go, okay, I get it. Where students are normally at school for 6 hours a day, but it's not 6 hours of learning. You've got your recess, lunch, we have assemblies, interruptions. So it's looking at,
I think also a lot of the weight of the pressure of the learning is channeled through the fact that they're there with their mates, like they're there with their friends, and they're learning in a really nice and warm environment. Now it's just them and their computer screens. So I suppose at every level, but I suppose mainly managers and then the teachers need to sort of be conscious at all times that all of these other factors in real life and real learning, in like physical learning, come to sort of balance it out a little bit and make it easy. So it's not a case of like 100% mirroring what was happening. And I think, Abdul, to be honest, you seem to, and your institution seems to have learnt quite well, but I don't think everyone's on board with that, in that sense where it's not like lockdown is new. We had it previously. Surely we learnt some lessons from round one. I think everyone needs to sort of really get on board that learning from round one of lockdown.
And I think you meant what you just said a second ago was important, like as in the whole routines or whatever. And that's, when we sort of look at planning for this learning from home, it is in the back of our mind. It's like, okay, we know parents are working. We know, parents aren't teachers. So it's sort of setting up work where it may be just revisiting work they've already had, they've already learned in the classroom. It's providing the parents with a bit of a routine, like a bit of a timetable where it says, get up every morning at the same time, breakfast at the same time, first part of the day, a morning routine or a 20-minute lesson, then a bit of a break.
Maybe you can have assembly at home with the family.
Sorry?
Make them line up. Assembly at home with the family.
Yeah. Has that been novel for you?
Yeah, so it's it's trying to support the parents as much as we can, and showing parents that we understand. We don't expect a lot of work from your end. Look after yourselves, look after your children. Here's some work that you can be doing with your kids. But it's not, if you don't submit it, it's not like that's going to, impact your child negatively, come school time when they return. It's a unique situation that we're in, and it's a tough one, and the leaders and management hopefully understand this and know that we're in a tough situation, and we all just need to support each other, and everyone needs to do their best. And from my involvement around schools and people I know, I believe schools, teachers, they're doing an amazing job and working as hard as they can to support families and students with their learning from home.
Yeah,
Sorry, go on. Absolutely.
I was going to mention, I agree on that point, and also, Brother Sufyan, you mentioned about balance. I think that I found that it doesn't really get communicated as much to parents and students about that. And obviously because, teachers have limited time where they have to deliver lessons and they don't really get that chance to speak to students. But from what I've experienced, and firstly, the first lockdown I experienced with my own children, I was actually going crazy the first couple of weeks, trying to get everything done and trying to be, super mom and teacher and so forth. And I just had to stop at some point, and I said, something has to give. And then I had a look at the amount of work my kids had to do. It wasn't a lot, but it was a lot for me. And I just decided to pick and choose what I wanted to get them to do, because it was impacting on them, impacting on me. And we had a lot of different things that was going on in the house, and, so many distractions that are on there as well. So, I gave my kids options about what they wanted to do. And even this time around, when I'm speaking to students, high school students and parents, I tell them the exact same thing. Don't overburden yourself. You're not teachers. It's okay. Give your children the option. Give them options. Try to get them into a routine. Have a look at what they want to do. Don't force them. And it's okay if they don't catch up or if they don't stick to a routine. Just, we have to just try and do the best that we can until we return face to face.
I think maybe some leniency across the board is warranted in that regard. I know other parents who are also teachers as well, who did the very same thing. They said, look, for my child, they've got to do a bit of literacy, a bit of numeracy every day. And if they're hitting a few of those, then I'm happy. But yeah, sometimes...
You were going to say something?
Yeah, sorry, go ahead, Chad.
Oh, no, I was just going to say, how you were mentioning picking and choosing because, the workload is so extensive. But when it comes to us, our work is, and the submissions that we have to submit by the end of the day, it marks our attendance. So we could easily just say, oh, well, I'll be away today and tomorrow and the next day, and eventually you're away for the whole term. So, just kind of like, I want the teachers to answer the burning question, why are you guys giving so much work, or where's this extra work coming from? As you mentioned, it's kind of the school. They're saying, okay, we'll measure the teacher's performance based on, the work that they do.
Yeah, Abdul, why are teachers giving so much work?
Thanks for the question. I just want to say thank you for the question, Zara, and then we'll move on to the actual answer to that question as well. Does anyone want to specifically answer that question?
Shahad, you feel like you've got a real bone to pick. Like you really want to get at someone.
It's not her. She's channeling the thoughts of others behind her.
Your whole Year 12 cohort has just fallen on us saying, give us an answer.
They want me to cancel the trials for them. They're telling me, you're our only hope. Please cancel the trials for us.
The Convo podcast would like to recommend to Nessa that all trials are cancelled.
I wish.
Look, I think at this point I'd like everyone to just take a break and just stretch, and we'll come back. Now, on a serious note, we've got a comment here from one of the contributors to our podcast. She's not really, but I'm hoping after that comment she will be. It's the first time I'm seeing a comment. But it says here, I'd like to touch base. So I'm guessing she's a teacher. I like to touch base with parents via Zoom and give them the opportunity to let off some steam. That's fantastic. And I know it's difficult, obviously, for teachers because you already have to try and touch base. It makes it sound like it's so easy, but you have to touch base with your 30 kids and then with your senior management and touch base with your programs and everything else. But if we can actually try, because everyone's trying here to put others before them. That's essentially what it is, right? Try and put the other person before you to as much an extent as possible without compromising your own mental well-being. But yeah, allowing parents an opportunity to let off some steam is a fantastic strategy, I think, that we can all implement.
I think that's what Sister Aisha was mentioning, that she calls the students but ends up listening to the parents because they've got some very valid and real grievances as well. In fact, I know a teacher who was recently doing his parent-teacher interviews over the phone, and he shared his experience, and he said that just starting off the conversation with that parent by saying, thank you for everything that you're doing, and we recognize that it's an extremely difficult time for you, worked wonders. Like just a single sentence of gratitude to parents worked wonders in making a constructive conversation. I
would also just add to that, I know we're the hosts here, and we should probably give you guys a bit of an opportunity.
I know, right? We're doing a bit too much talking.
Just on that, because I've got a final thought on that. A fantastic idea along those lines would be to just make a little, we make Zoom videos all the time for students, but if you make a Zoom video, like just a video, and just upload it for parents as well, to just watch a video acknowledging their efforts, I'm kind of just channeling what Hamza said, but like in that same format, like just put a video out there, say, and tell the kids, I want you to get off the chair, put your mom, put your dad on that seat. Instead, just get them to watch this. A nice little 5-minute, we appreciate everything you're doing, and okay, off you go. Now it's time for your son to
Mum, dad are working already. They're in their work meetings on Zoom. They don't have time to sit and watch a video. Abdul's just going to send a newsletter. That's all he's going to do.
Now, look, I can talk, you can jump on Facebooks on public schools. I'm coming from a public school perspective because, some of the things I'm hearing is that it might be a private school thing where there's quite a lot of pressure. But I look at public schools and you can just jump on Facebook public school pages and, schools are inundated with, really positive things from parents saying, thank you so much for everything you're doing during these lockdown periods. And likewise, the key message to parents is that, we appreciate and understand how challenging these times are. And we thank you for everything you're doing for your kids. So I think,
I was wondering when that plug would come for the DET because it's been 54 minutes and you haven't said anything.
I think it might be a public schools thing. So,
just casually tried to plug in.
We're ahead.
Well done. Congratulations, Abdul. Good job. What raise are you looking for?
I must say, actually, as well, with my experience working with an independent school and a government school, I have seen quite a big difference. And working in the COVID intensive program, they have really realized, again, like everybody's been saying, the mistakes that were made or their learning experiences from the first lockdown. And because of that, they've put new measures into place. And the big focus for me has been about the mental well-being of the students. And actually, when I do speak to a lot of the students, when I'm on the phone with them or I get them on, we use Microsoft Teams to do our little class calls, almost, I think 99% of them tell me that they haven't actually in about, I don't know how long, spoken to anybody. So even the teachers, because the teachers don't get a chance to get around to call, every 30 students or whatever. And sometimes they're teaching, multiple years. So they don't get that chance to do that because they're busy preparing lessons and so forth. But then they really appreciate to have a teacher or a tutor get on the phone with them, once a week, even if it's that, and just to check on them to see how they're going. And have that face-to-face interaction. And they've all expressed how much they appreciate that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's important. That's something that I always tell teachers as well. You're going to have a much better outcome. You're going to spend hours trying to put something together that probably the majority or a lot won't access, instead of using that time like that, like take the time to make a phone call, and it's going to be much better for you, your well-being, but also the student and the families. So I think that's a important point that Aisha makes, is that that's really important for a teacher, to understand and identify that, what, I'm better off spending my time. Yes, I need to, obviously teachers, like, let's be real, obviously we have to prepare and plan, but as a teacher, I'm better off spending my time picking up the phone and making that call and having that conversation with a parent, rather than trying to set up multiple lessons, bombard them with emails and Zoom sessions and, Google Classrooms or whatever it may be that, the platform the school's using.
Yeah, and I think this comment was, I can't remember who mentioned it before, about building the relationship, because what you do now, obviously, eventually, Brother Sufyan, eventually when we go back to online learning finishes and go back to face-to-face, they'll remember that interaction that they had with you. They'll remember that relationship and that care and compassion and love that you showed. And that'll actually flow through to the face-to-face learning. I feel that's...
We got a comment from 𝗟𝗲𝗰𝗵𝗶𝗴. Abdul, you might know him. I would have hoped the relationship has been built between teacher and student, given that the lockdown occurred in June. Do you think that's enough time? Like, is it okay to just think, okay, well, it's been a while now, relationships should have been built by now? Is it that easy, or is there more to it?
I'm assuming that's probably maybe regarding a comment maybe Aisha made with building the relationship, or maybe something
just generally relationships between students.
Of course. By then relationships would be built, no doubt. But from a primary perspective, you still need to sort of have that touching base and contacting parents and contacting students. I mean, you look a lot of whenever, and I'm speaking from my point of view, whenever I know teachers jump online or have discussions with students, the thing that students miss the most is seeing their teacher, is seeing their friends. So this is why I was sort of saying earlier that I'd say there's no need, especially primary school, there's no need for trying to teach a live Zoom lesson. Pre-record something, but have a live Zoom session where, kids can jump on, see your face, you can see them, they can see each other, have that contact. So that's, I guess, maybe, I'm assuming that's what Rami was talking about, like, hang on, relationships should be built. Yeah, they're built. But at a primary level, kids miss that. And I'm assuming high school as well. And Shahad would be able to, tell me if I'm wrong. But even when I was at high school... She's
just a hermit. She doesn't interact with anyone.
Yeah, that's right. But when I was at high school, that's what I loved.
No, I shouldn't have said that. Well, no, yeah, that's true. Like, having a social life, it's crucial, especially during the HSC. You need to have an outlet whether it's like your hobbies, exercise, or even just seeing your friends. One thing that I have heard from one of my friends, she was recommending to have like a Zoom library or like a study room. She's like, going forward, if we can have just a study room, all the students just join in, even like no teacher needs to be there, or just teacher stays there to moderate the whole thing. And just the students can sit, because sometimes we are motivated if we see other people studying, and we can just sit and just have a silent study room. So maybe that's one way we could kind of have that socializing aspect.
You can do it on Zoom.
Pardon?
You can just do that on Zoom.
Yeah, I think that's...
But even FaceTiming your friends feels like Zoom sometimes. Like, if I'm FaceTiming my friends to socialize, it still feels like a classroom setting, because I'm so used to seeing all my classes and everything lecture style. Like, even class sometimes feels like a YouTube video. It is like you're still disconnected from it all. But yeah, so that's one solution going forward.
We've even, like, just throwing it out there, we've even on timetables that go out, or routines or suggestions that go out to parents, there's a note in there that says, like, you know, something we highly encourage is that, you know, get your child, if they've got friends and if they can get in contact with them, like a phone call where they can have a chat about how their learning's going and how things are, just to have that social contact, is important, and that's something we've pushed as well.
Yeah. I want to ask you guys real quick. We are hitting the hour mark here, so we're going to try and wrap up soon. So my kid is he's 5. This is his first year in kindergarten. What a way to start kindy for anyone who started last year and this year. And you know, he's got a lot. He goes to a private school, so he's got a lot of work. I feel like that's just how private schools are. He's got a lot of work to do, right? I think for that age anyway. And, you know, my wife does sometimes sort of say that, you know, I've got concerns around the quantity of work that we've got to do here. And my attitude is kind of like, you know, you do your best, but then everything after that is like, just be prepared to have a conversation with whoever pulls you up, by showcasing the reality. Like, here I am, like I'm spending inordinate amount of time doing all the work. I feel like there needs to be a level of self-assurance, even with parents, right? Like, just be assured in yourself. Okay, if you think that your kid's doing enough, don't stress too much about expectations that have been placed on top of you by people that you might think, you know, don't have a good view of what your day-to-day is like. It's okay. Because sometimes we have this idea, I'm sending my kid to this school, we're paying fees for this school, we should probably follow the guidelines and rules that the school sets. But I think at the same time, because they don't have insights, you know, Orwellian grade surveillance of what's going on in our homes, it's okay sometimes to just have that self-assurance that, look, I'm doing my part. And when that conversation happens, if it happens for why XYZ submissions didn't come through today, I'll have that conversation then. Should be okay to sort of pass on a couple of submissions on that basis, don't you guys think?
I think so. I think it's always, you know, parents should just have that perspective and just do what's best for your family and for your situation, and don't stress about it. If you don't get that done, it's okay. It's not the end of the world type thing. And especially with younger children like kindergarten and year 1 or primary, you know, parents should just get them involved in sort of house duties, like, you know, even with cleaning or gardening or baking and cooking, and just read a book and enjoy that family time. Well, you have that now. So they'll actually learn a lot from those hands-on and family experiences, and just do the basic minimum. Like, if you just need to, you know, read a book, do a bit of literacy and numeracy throughout the day, and that's fine, you know, because then you won't stress yourself, you won't stress the children. And like you said, just have that conversation later on if it arises, and just say, this is what works best for my family.
We have a comment from someone on Facebook pretty much mirroring the same sentiment. A conversation needs to occur around the skewed concept of productivity. Output is synonymous with progress. So get something out, submit something, and that's progress. From GDP in the economic sector to workloads in education. Yet more is not always better. Family time, connections, well-being, foundational skills, and reflection are also worthy. And I think that's absolutely true, 100%. And the follow-up comment on that, on workload, my daughter just commented in agreement, we don't even have PDH this week, yet they've given us work for this week. So we're getting some agreement regarding, you know, taking it easy and just sticking to some of the basics, and that's productive in itself. And also sometimes experiencing those excessive workloads as well. I think everyone just needs to chill out, relax a bit, and realize this is a really tough situation for all involved, and everyone needs to cut everyone else some slack.
Yeah, I think, you know...
Thanks for the clap.
No, I think, look, you know, you need to remember that teachers, schools are trying to cater for the, 30 kids in their class, the 600 students in their school. So I think, there needs to be some work set. But I think a key message that, I've been pushing as a leader, and I know leaders around me and schools that I'm in touch with, I know their key message to parents is that this is just some work for you to do. Don't feel, don't stress. You do your best. Your child does their best. That's all we can sort of ask. And we're sort of lucky as leaders as well. Just like Aisha sitting here, she's got children. She's a parent, plus she's a teacher. So as a leadership team, we sort of, make sure that we're communicating and engaging with teachers that are parents as well. That way we're sort of taking in, grabbing their thoughts on, okay,
that's like an instant line of feedback for you as well. Of
course, that's right. And going back to some, and I don't know if we are wrapping up, but Aisha mentioned earlier about, providing that, bit of advice to some parents of, yes, don't stress sort of thing. I've got a friend, some of you know, Edgy, he's got lots of kids. It's like, my neighbour yesterday, I was outside and he was frustrated and talking to me about how there's so much work and he's just struggling with it all. And I just said to him, look, I'm not sure. I know his kids go to a public school, so I do know that it's not enforced sort of thing. I said, there's work there for you to do. If you can't do it, here are a couple of things that are simple for you to do. And it's that reading, like read to your children, listen to them read. You'd be surprised how important having conversations with your children is. Like, forget about sitting there with a paper and a pen, read to them, discuss what they're reading. I'm talking primary level, of course. Having those conversations around what's happening, what they're learning, that's the most important thing.
I think we've got a couple of beautiful concluding comments. They weren't necessarily intended as concluding comments, but now that I've said that, I suppose they are. From Aisha about the skewed concept of learning, like learning can take place outside of the context of our exercise books. And of course, having that channel, that direct line with people. Abdul, Shahad, maybe a final comment from yourself to wrap up tonight's show?
Yeah, so as I said before, it really is a joint struggle. We're all in this together. It's easy to say, don't stress, don't worry, but when there is so much pressure put on us as Year 12 students to perform well in the HSE, it really is mentally exhausting. But alhamdulillah, we have to make the most out of it. At least we do have access to a quality education. Many people don't even have access to this, so alhamdulillah, we always need to be grateful.
I think if I can summarize the absolute take-home point would be there's about 3 hours and 29 minutes left for your submissions, kids. So you really need to get on with it. Stop watching this show now and get on with those submissions. No, look, I wanted to thank everyone. I was really, really, really happy to have everyone on board today on this conversation. At the Convo, we try and, literally try and mirror to the best of our abilities a conversation that takes place in the real world. And obviously we're talking about cutting ourselves some slack because it's not as conversational as the real world might be. But we hope you've enjoyed, to our audience, we hope you've enjoyed tonight's discussion as much as we have. We hope you've benefited from it. And we hope you can take that sense of self-assurance away tonight to just do your best and have that faith in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And of course, remember each other in your du'as, remember each other in your, well wishes, and try and help each other out wherever we can. We might leave it there. Hamza,
before we do, if Abdul can shamelessly plug the Department of Education, then I can absolutely shamelessly plug the Convo podcast. We do have this podcast every fortnight, 7:30 p.m. So if you enjoyed this particular episode, first of all, step one is to go back and watch the entire backlog of our previous 19 episodes. And then inshallah, your homework is to watch the next. But please do, if you enjoyed this, drop our Facebook page a like, so you can get notified of upcoming episodes and things, inshallah. We do try to address issues that are relevant and that people are thinking and feeling. So please do join us for the next one as well, inshallah. That's it from me. Jazakallah khair once again to our guests. We might ask you guys to hold off from quickly jumping off this meeting as we wrap up. But Jazakallah khair, thank you very much for your contributions. They've been enormously valued, and I'm sure everyone here's learned a lot alongside our audiences at home.
Thank you for having us.